Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. So today I'm going to be redesigning Toralei Stripe. So for my inspiration board starting out, I have a picture from the musical Cats and also pictures from the movie Cat People, both of which I feel are very formative in a lot of Toralei's designs. So here I'm just sketching out the basic shapes of what I want her design to be, because these are for how I do my different iterations of the designs, so that way I can come up with a bunch of rough concepts and then pick and choose all the different parts I like. So also on this mood board I also have a lot of various inspiration. I definitely wanted my baseline here to be punk, because that's definitely my comfort style, it's what I tend to gravitate towards, but I also wanted to blend in some scene and some emo inspirations, just have a little bit more to play with. So our first outfit here that I'm sketching out is very heavily punk based, with a studded battle jacket and some plaid pants. This next one was a little bit more scene focused with the raccoon stripes, which I always really loved about her original design of using the raccoon tails as like tiger stripes. So I'm playing with some knit fabrics for that one. This third design here, I definitely wanted to go very hard on mall goth. This kind of ended up being my favorite little mini design iteration here, so I definitely pulled from this third design a lot. Of the very teased out hair and a long leather trench coat, lots of spikes, mismatched leggings, giving very Phyllis Gabor. For this fourth look, I was very inspired by the big ruff from the Cats musical, so I definitely want to incorporate that into her silhouette. Just trying out her classic hair, which I always appreciated was a bob, because it's like Bob Cat, so I wanted to do that here, and I was experimenting with some shorts, some fishnets here. I was also very detail focused on this design process. This redesign took me an hour and 15 minutes, which is more than double what it usually takes me, because I just had so many ideas of because I'm very deeply involved and invested in this sort of fashion style, I had so many ideas that I wanted to do here. It was really difficult just choosing one thing for each part. This next design here was a little bit more relaxed, with a plaid flannel and a little halter top. So here I'm just looking through and finishing up that fifth design there, going back to my inspiration board. The example from Cat People, I feel like the inspiration there was definitely a lot more subtle in the final product, but I did take inspiration from the cut of the collar that she wore and also the pinstripes on the suits. So here I'm just writing out my favorite parts of each of the little mini designs that I did and taking each of those. So I'm combining the different hairstyles here. So I have those big teased out sides from the mall goth look, but I also have the raccoon tails and a small little flip bob at the bottom there too. I also had the idea of her wearing these cat's eye sunglasses, these little tiny shades, but I ended up not putting them in the final design because I thought the design was also already looking really busy, so I didn't want to push anything too far. So I've got the leather trench coat, but with the big Cats-esque ruff. I also wanted to give her whiskers, because I really like making my designs a lot more monstery than is really possible to do in doll form, where you have to stick to a very generic sort of body plan. Here, where I'm just doing drawings, I can definitely explore and have a lot more freedom with concepts. So even though I imagine whiskers, rooting them would probably take up a bit extra time in manufacturing, although I imagine it would probably be similar to rooted eyelashes. But either way, back to this redesign, now I'm just sketching out a little bust of her face here, so that way I can experiment with what I want to do for her makeup once I get to the coloring process. So I'm going with a very saturated orange for her skin tone that is similar to the reference images from Cats that I chose, but very saturated because that's just my style. Here in this little bust head, I'm just mapping out what I want to do with her makeup, so I'm doing a very intense cat's eye with a lot of under eye shadow, because obviously with some dark lipstick also. Her color scheme, I wanted it to be mostly oranges and reds with little pops of yellow throughout. I think it's just very cat-like, it's very jungle cat, this sort of color palette. It's always been a personal pet peeve of mine whenever they try to put purple on Toralei, because I really hate the color combination of purple and red. It's my least favorite thing, so any purple was a hard no for this design for me. So for her color palette, It's very warm, based in a lot of red and yellow, as mentioned before, but also with a good amount of black to help balance and tie everything together and keep with the alt aesthetics that she's got going on. So for her eye makeup, I also wanted to do this really intense sort of cheetah print in this bright yellow stripe going from underneath her brow across the side of her face, because I feel like really intense makeup is just a really fun thing that you get to play with in the subculture. The coloring time for this part here took me very long, and much longer than I was expecting it to take. So overall this design process took me about 4 hours and 45 minutes. So definitely one of the longer ones, and I think it's because there is just so much detail here, and it took a long time to line all this. But it's because a lot of her clothes I have in different patterns, which easy to print, but hard to draw when you're lining them all on a piece of copy paper. Because I definitely wanted to have a lot of different patterns. I feel like that's one of the roots of Toralei's designs and outfits a lot of the time, is tiger stripes and animal prints and stuff like that, because it just helps tie together all of the cat-like elements. And I also think the bright clashing colors and patterns and textures are very punk. With her design, I definitely wanted to play around a lot with texture, so I have furs and some knitted bits and lots of leather, as well as more stretchy fabrics for like the leggings and such. So there's definitely a lot of texture and variation and clashing going around here, which is very fun design-wise because it gives me an opportunity to do lots of different things. Another idea I had here, which you can see in passing as I'm coloring, is the idea for her to have a leg sleeve of tattoos on her leg, and on it are just various cheetah prints and tiger stripes, as well as a stylized drawing of a cat, some yarn, a crescent moon, because I always feel like the crescent moon and like the idea of a moon in general was never really utilized in Werecat designs, even though I really feel like they should have been. There's also a paw print, cat's eye, little mouse. I've always been really attached to the idea of Toralei having a little green mouse cat toy. It's just something I like came up with when I was a kid playing with her dolls, and I've never let go of it. And then there's just some cat scratches designs on her legs, and then right at the very top, number 9, because cats have 9 lives. So here for her necklaces, she's got a spiked collar, because collar for kitty cat, and then I also wanted to do a chain necklace with barbed wire on it, and a big moon pendant, again to put that front and center. Again, the celestial moon design isn't really as heavily rooted in my redesign of her as compared to the werewolves, but I feel like it's definitely more present than it has been in any sort of official generation. So here I'm coloring that legging of tiger stripes, and you can see here on her belt chain I have a bunch of stuff hanging off of it, going from just left to right. I have this sort of like puffy sort of sparkle ball, the cat toy, then a piece of yarn, then a laser pointer, because obviously, then one of those little jingle balls, mouse, and a feather. On her shoes, I wanted these shoelaces to actually be yarn, because again, kitty cat toy. It's definitely fun in this redesign getting to play around with so many little details, because here on her leg I have a little tie that is cheetah print that is pulled from the Cats musical reference. Here I'm just coloring in all that yarn that I talked about. I also wanted her to have claws on her hands and her feet, and one thing that you'll notice is that her nails are shorter on the hand that's just pressed against the wall than the hand that's doing the little like cat scratch pose, because I was imagining her claws as retractable like a cat's, so they're out in that hand and in on the other one. Here I'm just doing that loose knit texture that came from the inspiration boards. I really like how her hair came out. The colors of it were inspired by that Blood of Christ Gerard Way hairstyle from Revenge era. I also have a red tie tied around her waist as a belt. For the background, I decided to use this picture that I took back in 2019 of some spray painted doors that I found in the basement underneath my boyfriend's apartment complex. So here I'm coloring in that eye makeup, really dark under eye makeup contrasted with this really bright streak across her face. For her earrings, I just wanted to do some simple spikes because there's a lot going on everywhere else. It needed a break, especially with how like big and colorful her hair already is. I didn't want the earrings to be too dramatic so that they would just get lost in all the fur. On the one sleeve of the leather jacket that is intact, I also have all these bright red spikes and a little button that is shaped like a little fish. Then here I'm just starting to do all the shading, which took a while because there's a lot of different patterns and textures and colors going on in her design, and I wanted to make sure I didn't overwrite or like cover up any of that detail by the shading. I really like how like piercing and neon green her eyes look compared to everything else, because I wanted to definitely use very little amounts of contrasting colors in this design, so that way when it isn't red or orange, it really pops out. I also really like the one sleeve design here because as a doll, not only is it just a cool asymmetrical design, it also saves on production costs because then you don't need fabric for that other sleeve. Around her neck area was definitely a little confusing to color because there's just a lot going on in that area between the straps of her shirt and 3 different necklaces and her hair and the fur on the back of the coat jacket. It was definitely hard to keep track of what was going on there, but I think it's a lot clearer now that it is colored in. So here I'm doing all the shading and highlights on all the little metal bits all throughout her outfits. I really like how that belt chain ended up coming out. For the lining of her jacket, I wanted it to be this orange plaid to help incorporate that very classic sort of punk texture into it somewhere. So I'm just shading that in now, then moving on to her top. I wanted to go with something that was strappy and had strings for cats again, all throughout it. So it's just this little sort of corset-laced little halter top with a strap of fabric that goes around the bottom of it, and a high-waisted leather skirt, which I'm coloring in here. It was really fun to do the texture on this. I used a bunch of different particle tools and watercolor tools to make it sort of almost look like alligator skin. Then moving on to that pinstriped sock inspired by the pinstripe suit of the Cat People movie. For her shoes, I wanted it to be these little spiky boots with sort of like strappy texture on the sides of them to help tie in with the straps of the shirt, but with an almost sort of Converse-esque tongue to it to just incorporate a bunch of different styles together. And I also wanted the heels to have these like cat scratch cutouts on them. I also have a glove on the one hand, but just a leather strap with spikes on it on the other. I imagine these details would just be molded if they were made in real life. So here I'm just coloring this pendant. I was imagining it as sort of like life-size, not doll-size, but like it would be made out of this sort of glittery resin. Here I'm just coloring all the little cat toy accessories on her belt chain. Gotta stay enriched somehow. I really like how this redesign turned out. I was very intimidated going into this redesign because she is one of my favorite characters and I already really like her Gen 1 design. So I was definitely like, okay, what am I going to do to make it new and feel like Toralei and not just be in the shadow of the other one? And like, I still really like Generation 1's design. I don't think my design is better than it per se. It's definitely a lot more complex. It reads as sort of 2 different lines to me instead of this being like a main outfit. It almost reads as like a very much fancier one because I wanted to include a lot of detail and a lot of references and ideas because I was just very afraid of it not sort of living up to Generation 1's. But I really like how it turned out, and you will see the finished product in just a moment right now. So here's the finished design. It is so saturated and bright and orange and neon, and I really love it. I really like the shapes of her design. I think she has a really distinct silhouette, so I'm definitely really happy with how this turned out. But let me know what you think in the comments below. So moving on to a little comparison here of the 3 generations with mine. I definitely feel like mine is pretty similar to G1, but then I actually like look at the images and they're very different. I think it's just because the way I drew this Toralei is very similar to just how I imagine, like how I like hallucinate her looking when I'm looking at the screen. This is like the Toralei that I see in my brain. So it's definitely fun having a fully rendered image of what I've been imagining in my head all these years. And then here's just a quick little compilation of all the redesigns that I've done, all in one image together. I've always imagined Toralei as being really short and chubby, and I really love how different she looks compared to everyone else. Her presence is very, like, distinct, which I really love for an antagonist character and a character as strong as she is. So here's just the final design again, just so you can see it before I send you off. Next month, I'm hoping to do a redesign of both Jackson and Holt in this same video, so be on the lookout for that. Make sure to follow me on my social medias, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!